In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Bazzite running on the all-new Asus ROG Flow Z13. This is a 2-in-1 tablet powered by AMD's brand new Ryzen Ai MAX Plus 395. And with this, we're getting what AMD is claiming to be the world's fastest iGPU, the Radeon 8060S. And yeah, so far through my testing, it definitely seems to be. In fact, it's on par with the dedicated RX 7600, and not the 7600M, I'm talking about the desktop variant, and in some cases, this iGPU actually outperforms that DGPU. Now again, we've got Bazzite here. If you're not familiar, basically we've got an operating system that's very similar to what's running on the Steam Deck, and the developers over at Bazzite have been really awesome. I do want to give a big shout out to Anthea's because I wouldn't be able to get this up and running with TDP control without their help. They kind of bent over backwards to get this up and running quicker than they usually do, but it's still early. There's still bugs that they need to work out with this unit. But either way, performance here is amazing with Bazzite on this device, and in this video, we're going to be testing nothing but 1440p. Keep in mind, the Z13 does have a 16:10 aspect ratio display with a resolution of 2560 by 1600, but I'm going to be using my game capture device to make it easier. And with that, we do have to kind of swap over to 16:9 aspect. So it's going to be 2560 by 1440. And since the ROG Flow Z13 is a 2-in-1, we've got a detachable keyboard here that works perfectly with Bazzite. Also acts as kind of a folio case to protect that screen. But what I'm going to do now is swap over to my game capture device. I've got a lot of games to show off, but I do want to get into the operating system just a bit before we get into testing. So getting right into it here with my game capture, as you can see, it might look a bit different from the original Steam Deck interface, and that's because what we've got here is actually CSS Loader with Urcdkey. So we can disable this, make it look just like the Steam Deck itself, if that's what you want to go for, or you can totally customize it. From what the developers have done so far with Bazzite on this thing is pretty amazing. I mean, everything seems to be working pretty well. There was one issue where I had very slow Wi-Fi and I just rebooted and it went right back up. That was about all I ran into. We do have full TDP control using handheld daemon. So from over here, we've got our mode, silent, performance, turbo, 40, 45, 54 to 70. And we've got custom here. We can go as low as, actually, I'm not sure how low we can go. Okay, 5 watts all the way up to 70 and anywhere in between. With TDP boost enabled, it does take us up to around 83, 84 I've seen it jump up to. But turbo mode here, really great. It'll just kind of fluctuate between 54 to 70 depending on what's going on. Performance mode for most of the stuff at 1200p is going to be fine though. But in this video, we're going to go up to that 1440p mark. And with the built-in screen here on the Flow Z13, it's actually 16:10, so it's 2560 by 1600, but over my game capture, I have trouble doing that, so we're at 2560 by 1440. From a handheld daemon, there's a few more settings that we have here. Processor settings, manual, our EPP, low, balanced high, or leave it to auto. We can totally disable CPU boost. There's a few custom schedulers here, but I've just been leaving this disabled, and we can set the GPU frequency manually. We've got a max limit, range, and a fixed limit. And at the bottom here, battery charge limit. So for this, I'm actually just going to go to auto mode. And all we're going to be doing is adjusting the TDP through the games. But we've also got access to the Steam quick menu. So we can set this up, and with 16 cores and 32 threads, it does take up a lot of room over on the left-hand side, as you can see. Disable the frame limiter completely. Allow tearing, half rate shading. So basically everything we've got over on the Steam Deck is accessible here. And let me give you a look at this. We'll go to our settings, system. So we've got that AMD Ryzen Ai MAX Plus 395 with the Radeon 8060S, up to 5.1 gigahertz, 16 cores, 32 threads. This Flow Z13 has 32 gigs of LPDDR5 running at 8000, and I've dedicated 8 gigs of VRAM to that 8060S. You can do it from the BIOS. And I've done a lot of testing with this 2-in-1 in Windows. I'm not exactly sure, the performance comparison here, but it still is a bit early for Linux on this device with that 8060S. Either way, like I mentioned, we're going to be running at 1440 with all of the games that we're going to be testing, and we can get over 60 FPS with them. So let's go ahead and jump into something. We'll do God of War Ragnarok. With 99% of the games we're going to be testing here, I am in turbo mode. There was one we went down to 20 watts with it. In the future, once the Bazzite team really kind of irons everything out with this unit, if you're interested in seeing lower TDP testing, let me know in the comments below. But right now with this game, we're at 1440p high FSR set to balanced. We're not using frame gen. And if you take a look at our performance metrics, you can see it's doing something a bit odd. It's kind of locking there at 60, then coming up. I have seen it dip under 60 every once in a while. But for the most part, we're right there at 60. I do think there is a driver issue going on or a game issue with the operating system and the chip we're using right now. But either way you look at it, I still think it's pretty impressive because after all, we're on an iGPU at 1440p high. And there's a lot more we could get out of this. You could keep it at 1440, drop it down to medium. You could even just go down to 1080 with it. Game still looks great. Or you could enable the built-in frame gen and almost double that frame rate. So now, instead of seeing that 60 FPS, we're well over 100 FPS with this game on an iGPU. And I'll tell you, I did see better performance in Windows with this game on this same exact chip. But again, it's still early for Linux on this system. I think it's performing absolutely amazingly. And if third-party companies did use this for, let's say, a small form factor Steam machine with no screen, keeping that price down, I think that a lot of people want to get their hands on something like this. The performance isn't up to par with something like an RTX 4070, but with that 8060 iGPU, you could keep a Steam machine using this APU very, very small. Next game I wanted to test here was Elden Ring. Right now we're at 1440p high settings, and I did test this at Ultra. Unfortunately, it did dip down to 58 FPS, so it was kind of locked there at 58. On a nice FreeSync display, it wasn't bad, but you know, going down to high, it still looks great, and we're able to achieve that steady 60 on this system. Borderlands 3, 1440p, high settings. Not bad, but I'm still encountering the same issue that I have in Windows recently with most all of the new GPU drivers from AMD and NVIDIA. It's got a lot of micro stuttering going on, and I am using the DX12 backend now. Over on Windows, I swapped between DX11 and DX12, still got that micro stuttering, and it's happening here, so I do think it's something to do with the game and the newer AMD and NVIDIA drivers. But we're seeing an average over 90 FPS with it at high settings 1440. Spider-Man 2, 1440p high, FSR set to balanced. And I just want to show you here, we're not using frame gen, we're at a true high settings, 1440, and if I move down to our FSR section, right there. Usually I'd go with the IGTI scaler. On older iGPUs, it seemed to work much better, but with this newer chip, I don't notice a performance increase or decrease either way, so I just kept it at FSR. There are a couple sections in the game where it does dip under 60 with these same settings here, but just like God of War and most other new games on the market, there's ways to get a lot more out of this on an iGPU, like frame gen. So we've got FSR 3.1 frame gen built into the game, and with it like this, we're seeing an average of 114 FPS. Black Myth Wukong, just a really hard game to run on any iGPU. 1440, medium settings, 75% resolution scale, and frame gen on. We saw an average of 79 FPS. Here's Fallout 4, and once we install it here in Bazzite without any modifications, this is basically the Steam Deck version, so we can't mess around with the settings before we launch, so I just call this Steam Deck preset. It is a lower resolution, and I did take it down to 20 watts. Steady 60, but just seeing the performance here, I know if we were able to take this up to 1440, we could run this at 1440 high all day, locked at 60. And the final game I wanted to test was Cyberpunk 2077. We're at 1440p, Ultra FSR set to balanced. Got an average of around 67 FPS with it. Not horrible for an iGPU by any means, given that we're at 1440 Ultra with this game. But to tell you the truth, high settings is probably where you want to be here at 1440, or if you wanted to go to 1080 or 1200, depending on what screen you're going to be using here, Ultra is going to work out great with FSR set to auto. But I also wanted to test it out with frame gen. Same settings, 1440p, Ultra. We've just enabled frame gen, and this is FSR 3 frame gen. Not sure why they went with an older version, but now instead of seeing an average of around 67, we're over 100 FPS with it. Personally, I'm really excited to see that this chip is running Linux so well, and again, I do think that this would be perfect for a small form factor Steam machine. If we see any of those Ryzen AI MAX Plus 395 chips on the market in these small form factor units, it's going to make for a great little 1440p Steam console. Even if it was a modified version of this chip with 8 cores and 16 threads, but they kept that 8060S iGPU, it would still perform really well at 1440p, and it could definitely keep the cost down, at least on AMD's chip side, only having to do an 8 core instead of a 16 core. But there's been no announcements or anything like that. However, I have heard word that there are a few mini PCs launching with this same chip, the Max Plus 395, so we'll be seeing some pretty powerful little mini PCs soon. But if you're interested in learning a little more about the Asus ROG Flow Z13, I'll leave some links in the description. And if you want to get Bazzite up and running on your device right now to work on a desktop, laptop, handheld, I'll leave a link for their website also. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Would this chip be enough power for a little home console connected to your big screen TV in the living room? Or would you need something with a bit more? Let me know your thoughts down below. And like always, thanks for watching.